Hello there. Good evening. This is Politics on Sunday, reaching you live from Abuja, headquarters of TVC News Northern Bureau. I am Femi Akande. Well, today our discussion will focus on a book whose content has unraveled so many issues in the past and to an extent may have also complicated the truth. A Journey in Service, an autobiography by Ibrahim Badamasi Babangida, may be making a bad situation become worse for many Nigerians and active participants in past events that shaped Nigeria's national life. It has again scratched the surface of old wounds that have refused to heal and brought back memories that have always lingered. But for some Nigerians, General Ibrahim Babangida's admittance of error and his willingness to take full responsibility is indeed commendable. The foreword of the autobiography written by General Yakubu Gowon is titled The Courage to Look Back. He said, and I quote, "It is one thing to be lucky to have the opportunity to lead one's country. It is a different thing to summon the courage to use that opportunity of leadership to change the landscape of society in many fundamental ways. Few leaders have the luck to do both and then live to tell the story firsthand for the benefit of posterity." Former President General Babangida has had the distinction of doing all these things, with all of us as living witness, end of quote. Now it is the words of General Ibrahim Babangida against other key actors involved in the events conveyed in his account of history. While joining me in the studio is my colleague Ademola Lawrence. He was at the launch of that book and also the launch of a presidential library that has already raked in more than 16 billion naira. Ademola, thank you for joining me on the program.
Thank you very much, Femi.
Yes, we're looking at former President Ibrahim Babangida's book, A Journey in Service, the controversy he has generated, his account of history, lots of events that shaped Nigeria's national life. How significant now? People are talking about the significance of President Babangida coming out 32 years after to tell us his own account. Is it too late?
So while speaking to a couple of people about this memoir, I remember speaking to Abiola yesterday, and I remember speaking to one public affairs analyst. One of the things that was very striking for me is the fact that they both agreed that 32 years after, I think everybody should just lay low and let everything just go, because he has come out to say he regretted his action. But one key thing is that some persons feels that he only said he regretted. He never said he was sorry. And another thing was the fact that when in the book, I remember that when President Bola Tinubu was actually giving his speech, one of the things that he said was the fact that former military president Ibrahim Babangida had the chance of making history. Indeed. And he never took that chance. And I think that that's one of the things that people are also looking at. You are saying that 32 years after this has happened, a whole lot of things have happened. As a matter of fact, people have lost their lives. Some persons, as a result of that, what could be some persons, while talking to Abdul yesterday, he said it's not about his father alone. For him, it's not just about his father. It's the fact that
that's Abiola,
yes,
the son of Abiola.
Yes, he said it's not about his father alone. There are people who have lost their lives. There are people who have lost their livelihood as a result of that. They could not recover from that particular incident since 32 years ago. So if you look at all of those things and putting them together 32 years after, one of the things that you will ask yourself is that, has Nigeria really moved forward from that event? Do we actually learn a lesson from that particular event? And I remember that when Vice President Yemi Osinbajo, when he was, previewing the book, so many people make joke about how he was able to go around putting the different personnel in the book, just to say, okay, because you did coup against this, you did, but all of you are just in one space now.
In a convivial atmosphere.
Exactly. So, if you ask me, I think that it's not just about 32 years after this happened. what exactly did we learn after that 32 years? It's a big question that we know.
Yes, and I think the biggest events, or his biggest account of the account of events that is generating the most reaction is that of June 12, because that was considered to be the most credible election ever in Nigeria's history of conducting elections. There are people even calling for his prosecution. We know that the winner of that election never had that privilege of becoming the president of Nigeria, despite his lofty plans, which he sold in his manifesto. That was the Hope 93 manifesto, yes, to Nigerians, and Nigerians bought it, and we all hoped for a better and brighter future, but all of that was truncated by the decision of that military administration to annul the result of the election. People are saying, beyond just, oh, I'm sorry, and let's move on, shouldn't some people be held to account? Shouldn't some people answer for it? And again, it's now like former President Babangida's words against the rest, because we have seen Abacha's son, Sadiq, even come out to say that, well, they are just envious of his father. Yeah. A lot of them wish they were in his father's shoes, and, now his father is dead. Dead men don't tell tales. Humphrey Nwosu, who was the head of the Electoral Commission at that time, is also dead. Yeah, we cannot also hear his own side of the story. It's just General Ibrahim Babangida against the rest.
Yeah, while I was even reading, I took time to read that particular part of it, because, of course, it's the most, you want to say it's the most interesting part of that book. And one very fascinating thing for me was the fact that when that story, how he started the story, that when he said that, when he came into power in 1985, what they had in mind was to return the government back, was to return the country back to a democratic elected government. And they didn't want to make the same mistake that General Yakubu Gowon made in 1975. And at the same time, that they didn't want to make the same mistake that General Olusegun Obasanjo made, after he returned the mantle back to the Shagari. And what was their excuse was the fact that they felt that the people that were the power handed over to the politicians at that time, they were corrupt politicians. But my question is, after all of these processes, you still made the same mistake that you were trying to shy away from. And that's a bigger question. So you're asking me if people are saying that, well, we want to get justice for what happened after 32 years. I think they have the right. Seriously, I think they have the right. It's another thing for you to say, okay, I want to get justice. It's another thing for you to say, you know what, I think what has gone has been done. Let's move on. And the question is, how do you now move on? We heal in different phases. Indeed. Some persons cannot, that 32 years cannot be quantified by, the things that happen to some families. Some families still live in that particular 32 years, as if it's still today. So the different phases is how the healing process will now start. Yes,
indeed. And, it's difficult to tell people how to heal, how they can find closure. For some people, it may just be, a prosecution that will give them closure to see that, yes, indeed, the government is doing this to ensure that, these people who participated in the annulment and also threw the country into that chaos that was experienced at that time, where a lot of people died, livelihoods were lost, some people were maimed, and all of that, are held to account. Some people even also criticize President Bola Tinubu for attending that book launch. They say, he was also an active participant and also a victim of the annulment of that election, because at that time he had won the election to represent Lagos West on the platform of the Social Democratic Party in the National Assembly. And that assembly was never inaugurated by General Ibrahim Babangida. And then, I was also speaking, before we just came on the, I was speaking with Sam Omashe, who was also a journalist, who is a journalist, a veteran journalist, and was also practicing at that time. A lot of them went into exile. And he said, well, for the president, he is now the president. We know he was also a victim of the tyranny of the military administration of Ibrahim Babangida and General Sani Abacha. But, he said, just like Winston Churchill would say, he told me a quote from Winston Churchill, which says that, in victory, be magnanimous, and in defeat, defiance. That President Bola Tinubu is now the president of Nigeria. despite what he went through, the struggle with MKO Abiola for the actualization of June 12, which did not materialize at that time, but he was able to still keep that spirit alive, continued mounting pressure on the military administration, and that eventually led to the advent of democracy in 1999, and since then we've had unbroken democracy with smooth civilian-to-civilian transition. So, well, for him, as much as he understands that, yes, these people really hurt the country and, set us several decades back with what they have done, there's still need for, there's still that need to be magnanimous and move on, even though he may not be able to tell people how to find closure or how indeed they can heal. But he has chosen his own path, believing that, well, what has happened in the past is in the past, but we must draw lessons from that and forge ahead.
President Bola Tinubu is just one person out of everybody that what happened in 1993 happened to. So he has chosen to toe this path. Let's not forget that part. He has chosen to toe the path of, okay, I'm forgiving, let's bygone be bygone, and let's move the nation forward. And I think that that's what he has done. But like we also said, you can't tell people how to heal. But in that process, there's also what we call, empathy. And I think that to a large extent, we both attended that event. I think to a large extent, there was no sign of empathy at that particular event.
But you know that the president also recalled he recalled an incident where he challenged former President Ibrahim Babangida and also reminded him again that at that time you had the opportunity to make history, but you failed.
You know why I said there was no sign of empathy? It was the fact that, the people who came to give goodwill message, it was looking as if, come on, there's something on ground that we are still trying to tackle. And that is the issue of the June 12 saga, which of course it was laid to bear. There were a lot of things that were inside that particular scenario, But the people who came on board are like, this order does not matter.
So you don't see it as an attempt by former President Ibrahim Babangida to express remorse and restitution, but rather as a bazaar, because it eventually turned into a fundraising.
Exactly.
Within 10 minutes, more than 16 billion naira
because some persons are even saying that, okay, the money you even
and this money is not going back to the country; it's not going to charity.
Of course, of course. I mean, 16 billion in less than 10 minutes. Some persons are even saying that the money raised from that particular event, why don't we look out for the people who were actually involved in that particular scenario and reach out to them? It is possible. That's why I said we find closure in different. I also understand. When I remember that when I think it was one of the speakers that was speaking at that event, and when he said, when they went to America, the presidential library is being funded by the American government. You remember? Yes. You remember that talk. So I understand all of those things, but there are scenarios to what is actually leading to this particular presidential library. You understand? The scenario is that of the June 12. So if that be the case, if that is the anchor for this, why don't we look in that particular direction and see that, okay, there should be some level of empathy. And don't just look as if, it's all about the presidential library. I understand that history needs to be, we need to tell ourselves the history of how all of these things happen. But at the same time, I felt that room was just made of yes, I regretted it, whatever actions I took. But at the same time, there is no hand of holy stretched across to say, I am sorry, but money raised from this fundraising can also go to some part of the family. The fact is that, Femi, let's not lie to ourselves. They know some families that are affected. They know some families that are affected as a result of this particular incident. So, if they know, you can reach out. You can reach out to them and say, okay, it's just a form of saying, I'm also sorry for what happened. You just don't say sorry for, okay, I was reading a story and somebody came out and said, what former military president said is not about the sorry part. It's not about the sorry part of it. It's the fact that it took you these 32 years. What happens to 5 years after you left office? Those are some of the things that, of course, were general. You also remember when former President Olusegun Obasanjo was talking. He said he should get ready. He said former military president IBB should get ready
for criticism.
For criticism,
yeah.
That
he called it bad belly. People will want to criticize him.
Exactly.
But people are. Let's look at the turnout of people at that event. We saw almost all living past presidents. That's all former presidents that are still alive, apart from President Muhammadu Buhari, who sent in a representative. We saw our former President Olusegun Obasanjo. We saw our former President Goodluck Jonathan, former President Yakubu Gowon, of course, President Bola Tinubu as the sitting president. We saw General Abdulsalami Abubakar. I know we saw also the Vice President Yemi Osinbajo. We saw Vice President Atiku Abubakar. We saw Vice President Namadi Sambo. I know people, now said that, this also goes a long way to show, the unity of the ruling class and how they have a unity of purpose. Yeah, yes, that sense of purpose, that unity of purpose among them. And it also kind of, falls back on the citizens to show that it appears as if it's the citizens that are divided across ethnic and religious lines. Yeah, very true. Very true. I was speaking to somebody yesterday, and he said that when we say youth should come and, take over the country, and the elders will say, it's not yet time, you'll make a lot of mistakes. And you know what he pointed out to me? He said that during their own time, they were just 28, they were 30, they were 33, they made a lot of mistakes. Now, the question is, can the youth also make mistakes at the same time so that they can also learn from those mistakes? But you look at that seat, by the time you calculate it, Femi, I think it will be, if you calculate all their years together, it will be almost like 500 years. He also spoke about several events like the Civil War. He spoke about the Vasta coup, the Gideon Orka coup, and all of these revealed the conflict, that has existed in Nigeria's history, and also put maybe the elites and those at the chain of command at each other's throats, and especially what led to the Civil War, which he said was a lack of discipline within the military hierarchy, where there was a coup that appeared to have taken out people from a certain ethnic group, which infuriated other groups. Now, from all of his accounts now, especially most of these issues still live with us. We still hear the people in the Southeast complaining about marginalization. A lot of them have not been able to move on since that Civil War. Former President Ibrahim Babangida was just about 25 years old when that Civil War was fought. Yes, and the former military president also, Yakubu Gowon, who was the head of state at that time. These people are still alive and have been able to give their own account of history from the federal government side. Yes, we also heard from Dim Odumeku Ojukwu, who is late now, who led the Biafran side in that Civil War. But people are talking about, closure. How well would we say, especially now that the ball is in the court of the current administration now, to forge ahead and help people find closure and create inclusion, a sense of inclusion for all Nigerians. But are you sensing that, like, to a large extent, that, all of this is being put in place? Also bearing in mind some major developments from the previous administration, infrastructure-wise, with the second Niger bill, the creation of the Southeast Development Commission, or the signing of the Southeast Development Commission bill by President Bola Tinubu, and also some key programs and plans of government directly targeted at the people in this area. So, Femi, I think to a large extent what is happening is, how long will closure be closure? So if you ask me, for example, I read that account of the Civil War. There's the account that was generalized. But when I read that his own account, where he said that it's actually not an Igbo coup, it was not an Igbo coup.
but the people who, who retaliate as a result of that. It was what, led to whatever happened at that particular time. And I think that over the years, there's not been enough closure in that particular area. Different accounts of different people who actually witnessed what happened in that particular time. Funny enough, the person who was at the echelon of powers at the time is still alive. So there are different arguments for how we can actually have a closure on this particular thing. But you asked if indeed there's a government on inclusion going on. I think to a large extent, yes, there's a government on inclusion going on. It might not be as fast as one will want it, but it's just a gradual process. Like you mentioned, the Southeast Development Commission, of course, which is also coming up, the different road infrastructures that is going on in the Southeast. But there's more to that. And the more to that is that, the people also feel that there needs to be a power shift to that part of the region. And you can't take it away from them. When they know that the different part of the regions has been favored in terms of how to do with holding power in the country. I think that going forward we need to do better in terms of trying to find an inclusion government. And I think another thing that also fascinates me about the book is where he talked about Lex Dimka. You remember?
Yeah, the Dimka
and how
coup.
Yeah, the Dimka coup.
Yeah,
and how
he was instructed
exactly
by
how General T.Y.
Danjuma
actually told him that go and flush him out of the radio house
at that time.
And he said that the first time he went, as he was coming upstairs to meet late General Dimka, he saw, and Dimka told him, if you come, I will take you out.
But that also reveals, power play, the politics and the military at that time, betrayal, backstabbing, and a whole lot of issues.
The first time he went, he couldn't do it. He couldn't do it. He said because he had to listen. He also had to listen to what Late Dinka had to say. He went back to General T.Y. Danjuma. T.Y. Danjuma was very furious. I gave you an instruction. Go back. He said it was the second time that he went back, and he had to do what he had to do because, as at the time, the country had gone into turmoil, and so they needed to make sure they stand their ground.
But indeed, since after all of these whole cycle of military coups, the country has largely and significantly developed. Our democracy, some people say, it's no longer nascent; it's now thriving. Military style or system of government has become unfashionable in Nigeria, old-fashioned in Nigeria. Of course, we're seeing some happening around like in Niger, Burkina Faso, and Mali, but for Nigeria has made significant progress. Let's talk about our democracy now, strengthening the democracy. We all agree that the military system of government is old-fashioned, but even in the democratic system of government, despite how many years since 1999 that the country has practiced democracy, there are still some missteps that sometimes sets the country back.
So, as a student of history and a student of political science, I will tell you one thing. Go back to 1966, when we had Avenue.
The Kadadanzego coup?
Yeah, no, the, what's his name? That was military head of state at the time. When the coup happened. Aguirre. That was when we now changed to unitary system of government. And it looks like, we maintained that unitary system of government, even though we were calling it a federal system of government. So whatever you are seeing now, it's a gradual process of how to change from that unitary system government into a federal system, which now, largely to an extent, brings, the dividends of what democracy should be all about. So, and I think that, looking forward in all of these things, how do, through democracy, how do people get the dividends of democracy? How do we Nigerians, how do we continue to strengthen our democracy? The fact is that we need laws, that will continue.
Strengthening of institutions.
Yeah, strengthening of institutions, most especially institutions, as a matter of fact, because it's institution that strengthens, your laws. So, and I think that if we don't do that, then there's a problem. from the judiciary to the executive and to the legislative, there needs to be that checkmate, that check and balance, where if you do something wrong, I can be able to check and balance you and say, okay, come, this is what you're doing. It's not about, let me use in the words of President Olusegun Obasanjo, bad belly, you understand? But we just need to do a check and balance. We need to do more in terms of how to strengthen our democracy.
All right, Ademola Lawrence, thank you very much for being a part of the program today. Well, that's our show for today. You can watch a repeat broadcast at 11 p.m. You can also see this episode again on TVC News YouTube channel. Thanks, everyone, and have a good night rest. See you next time.